Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Card Talk, a podcast where we spend a little bit of time talking about cards from the Lord of the Rings, the living card game. And I'm Dave Walsh.
And I'm Grant Thompson, just along for the ride.
And today we will be talking about the Steward of Gondor. That is a 2-cost attachment from the leadership sphere that does two things. It gives the hero the Gondor trait, and also when it's exhausted, it allows you to add 2 resource tokens to the attached hero's resource pool.
Probably one of the most used attachments in the entire game. It has still got a long life now. I don't know any deck that runs leadership that doesn't run Steward of Gondor. It's palpable to sneak attack. You just don't run that sort of deck without them.
I agree. It's actually a card that I always consider. My card pool, sometimes I don't. I run Sam in a Hobbit deck, and for some reason I have a hard time putting Steward of Gondor in a Hobbit deck, just for thematics. But I agree with you about its usefulness. Thematic
wise, yeah, you might not want to run it, but just running it for pure victory points of view, you'd put it in. I mean, yeah, you've got other if you're running a Hobbit deck, you have access to resourceful for the cost of 1. So yeah, you can get resources that way. I run Steward of Gondor in pretty much every leadership deck or every deck that has leadership in it because resources equals good.
Right. That's one of the hardest parts of the game is when you get resource locked because you have to spend a resource to do this, spend a resource to do that, and then all of a sudden you're out of resources.
Having more resources means you can pull out your bigger allies, pull out your bigger attachments that cost, say, 4, like the Citadel plate that we've not long since discussed.
You can pull out Gandalf. That's a first round Gandalf. That's a first round. Well, I guess it's not a first-round Gandalf, but it's a guaranteed second-round Gandalf, and it's a guaranteed second-round Faramir. Quick aside, when you run Steward of Gondor, do you just keep it exhausted in your play area?
Of course I do.
Yeah, I was going to say, I never ready it and I never exhaust it. It always just stays exhausted.
It's too much like hard work to ready and then unready the cards, especially when you're working on a small area.
Right. Right. I have to say that I don't necessarily think that this card is overpowered as much as you do. Like I'm not putting Steward of Gondor in every one of my decks that runs leadership. Especially if I have other resource generation like Theodred or even Denethor, where you can start with 3 resources instead of 1. You know, that extra boost at the beginning is helpful. So I'm not bound to use it. I find that when I have a card like Steward, I want it in my starting hand, and then I feel like almost psychologically feel like I have to have it, and that affects my play. And I know that that's my own issue that I have to get over. I will say that getting those 2 resources is a powerful effect. You know, resources are the lifeblood of the game for the players. And if you don't have the resources, Steward is definitely the way to get lots of resources really quick.
Cards that benefit from the Steward of Gondor, what would you say?
I think that the benefit of Steward of Gondor is twofold. It gives people the Gondor trait, or it gives your hero a Gondor trait, which is great. But I think that generating those resources and then being able to do stuff with those resources, here's the thing that I like about generating 2 resources every time, is that, yeah, you get the Gondor trait with the Steward of Gondor, but when you generate them, you can move them around. And to be able to move them around with something like the Peligir ship captain is a character that allows you to move things around. And then there's the parting gifts, which is also part of the leadership sphere, that allow you to move those resources that you're generating around. And then you have characters that also, when you have resources in your resource pool, there's characters that get bonuses like Ingold, which allows you to get 1 willpower for every hero that's got a resource in its pool. And then there's always Leadership Boromir that gives you +1 for having resources in its in its pool. So there's a lot of neat little card combos.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've never actually used Steward of Gondor for, again, the Gondor trait. I've always used it just for purely resource generation. I think I always will, because one thing I'd never do is run a Gondor deck. I've tried a couple of times, but expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, and the stats aren't even great for what you're getting for some of them. The Citadel Custodian, he costs 5, and he's only got 5 points worth of stats. Even looking through most of the Gondor allies stats, other than the odd Faramir or say Prince Imrahil from the Spirit Sphere ally, there's not very many strong Gondor traded allies. Really good cards for Gondor are the heroes. And it's like,
well, I think there's also a lot of good events and attachments that go on to Gondor. So having that Gondor trait for some of those attachments, what are they like? I guess for Gondor is a event.
I don't think I've ever ran a proper straight Gondor deck because of the fact that I am drawn to different archetypes other than Gondor. Now, I may build a deck around heroes that have been encompassed in the Gondor trait, but it's not the traits that I'm looking at. It's their abilities, their attack, their defense, their willpower. I have done themed decks, like when I've had dwarf decks. But I'm not one for, like, oh, we've got to use dwarves because we're entering a mine. Or we've got to use elves because we're hitting the woods.
And they call it a mine.
Yeah, a mine.
A mine.
An elf go underground where a dwarf dare not. I'd never hear the end of it.
Right. Right.
But yeah.
I mean, and there are some other options to the Steward. I mean, if you don't want to take up the deck space for that, I mean, you can bring out the Envoy of Peligir that gives you a resource. It's a neutral ally, and then you have a chump blocker, and you get 1. The Squire of the Citadel.
That Envoy of Peligir has a restriction on who she can give the resource to.
Absolutely, but I think that Éowyn is a noble hero, and so I think there's a lot of noble heroes and Gondor heroes out there.
Oh, definitely.
So I think that there's some other options other than running the Steward the Squire of the Citadel. That allows you to bring resources into play.
I think that's only when he dies. Just let me double check that.
No, that's right. When he dies, you can do that. So
yeah, but you've got resourceful there that you can use.
Right. Well, that happens all the time. That's expensive. That's 4, unless you're running secrecy, and then it's just 1. But
Steward of Gondor is also a unique attachment, which means there can only be 1 Steward of Gondor on the table, which is fair enough. There is only 1 Steward of Gondor until he dies. Mm-hmm. Then you've got multiple resourcefuls, so you can have up to, say, 5 extra free resources a turn if you run both the 3 copies of resourceful plus a Steward of Gondor. There's an extra 5 resources. And if you're running Monosphere 5 resources, there's a Gandalf straight away for you. Or there's a Bjorn, or whatever deck you're running, you can get one of your biggest, beefiest allies out pretty much straight away, second turn.
Right. And then I always think, what do you do with all those resources later on? I mean, I know that there's a bunch of cards that you can feed resources into and get bonuses, limited, but
a rider.
Yeah,
if
right.
Playing multiplayer.
Right. The Aaron Rider transfers them, and that's kind of what I was saying is that, I feel like early game maybe the Steward of Gondor is really good, but late game, I'm not necessarily in the need of all these resources because I've already set up my board and I'm just kind of developing it, and it's ready to go.
But then if you get a nasty treachery card and you don't have all those resources set up there, and that treachery card wipes out all your allies on the board, you're going to be a bit, oh, why did this happen to me?
Right. There's also that treachery card that, that in order to, it's not a treachery, but there's an encounter card that says you must pay one resource from each hero's pool in order to travel here, or in order to engage this enemy. There's something where you have to pay lots of resources in order to get through the quest.
One of the cards you were talking about is Old Wives' Tale from the Hunt of Gollum. And then you've got cards like of Bitter Wind from Khazad-dûm. And then even going to the Shadow of Fear from Khazad-dûm.
There's another condition that says if you have to pay 2 to ready the hero. Right?
That is Caught
in a Web, right?
And then you going into the Heirs of Numenor, there is so many. Lossark Bandit, the Market Square, all throughout most of the cycles, they've always got some card that you must pay resources for to not trigger a nasty effect or or to get rid of a card.
Right. And
that's why I think Steward of Gondor, even late game, is always valuable. It may not be as valuable as in beginning game where you can set up your board, but it is always valuable. So if you had to ring the Steward of Gondor, what would you give it, David?
If I was going to ring this guy, let's see. I really think that it's a great card early game, but I think it loses its value over the course of the game. And the fact that it is a unique card is thematic, but in terms of gameplay, kind of diminishes its effect. So I really think that this is an above-average card that gets considered. I'm somewhere between 4 and 5, but I think I have to settle on a 5 because I don't auto-include this guy. What about you, Grant? Where are you?
I'd put it at a 4, if I'm all honest. I enjoy using the card. I disagree where it loses its value.
So are you sure 4 is what you... I mean, it sounds like you think it's even stronger than a 4, but I mean, it's your rating.
4 is what I'm going for. In all honesty, if it had maybe a bit of a downside to Steward, I'd probably give it a higher rating because of the fact that the Steward's sitting on the edge of Mordor, and he's got them always peering, always attacking. So if we had that sort of threat with it, I think I would have given it a higher rating for a more thematic approach. But for the way it is at the minute, and I'm not going to in any way, shape or form, I love Steward of Gondor, but I can't give it a higher rating than a 4 at the minute. Okay, so join us next time where we'll be talking about Bilbo Baggins. Yes, Bilbo Baggins, you heard me correct. From On the Doorstep. The Baggins Sphere Bilbo, not the lore version. And I hope he doesn't give us as much problems as the last one.
Hope not. Have a great day.